Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to share with you the most unusual Ark creatures, so let's get into it. In at number 10 is the Astrocetus, and this is one of those creatures which on the surface may not seem that unusual, but I really can't think of any other game which has a creature like the Astrocetus. And also, this was a very new thing to Ark as well. No space things had been done in Ark, and the fact that with Gen 1 we had a space biome, and then we had this hunking beast of a creature, it is definitely an unusual Ark tame, as in it isn't like most of the other creatures in Ark. And there are only a couple of creatures which I can think of which are as unusual as this thing, and also at the same time follow the similar genre that this thing has of being a sea creature of sorts. The Astrodelphis obviously being a great example there, that meaning space dolphin instead of space whale, which is what Astrocetus means. Speaking of the Astrodelphis, next up is the Astrodelphis, and the only reason why I would say this is a little bit more unusual than the Astrocetus is its design is more unusual, and also its abilities are a lot more unusual than the Astrocetus. The Astrodelphis is essentially like a dart plane. This thing can just soar through the air and do so many acrobatics and shoot loads of lasers, and yes, it has technically been done before, but you wouldn't really expect it out of this creature, and its design and overall feel is very unusual, and I can't think of any Ark creature other than the Astrodelphis, of course, which controls like the Astrodelphis. And also, again, with the Astrocetus and Astrodelphis, it doesn't really make sense that they work outside of space, but they kind of have to. You know, it is the game of Ark, and there are many other maps, and there are many other biomes that aren't space biomes. So yeah, it just kind of breaks the immersion for me there. But you know, it's Ark, they're fantasy creatures. Who knows, maybe they can just dart around in non-space as well. Although they do make a lot more sense in space biomes. But obviously, for most of the time which you'll be using these things, you won't be using them in space biomes. You'll be using them to travel across the map, as both of them are great traveling mounts. The Astrodelphis being better for traveling, obviously, as it is a significantly faster creature. And also, it's just a lot more fun to ride around on. Next up, we have the Bulldog, and this is strangely one of the cutest yet horrifying creatures that Ark has to offer, and obviously it debuted with Operation, and I'm pretty sure it hasn't appeared in any other map since, but be sure to correct me if I did get that wrong. And in terms of this thing's abilities, it is just a light pet like the Shinehorn and the Featherlight, which essentially will debuff things like Reapers and the Nameless. Not really useful on any other map, but they're definitely really cute, and the fact that there is a mask for the Bulldog, and you kind of put the Noglin in the same spot here as they are similar creatures, they definitely are respected, but very unusual tames. Now, I don't know what it is, but the Managama always seems really weird to me, and the Managama just seems like a creature which doesn't seem like any other Ark creature which I can think of in any way, shape or form. This is essentially like a Ferox type thing with ice fists that can jump into the air and has some sort of elemental power, and that also has ice breath and can freeze creatures. This is definitely an oddity and an unusual tame which hasn't been revisited since. There is no other Ark creature to this day which is like the Managama, and also the spelling for it is pretty unusual as well, but once you learn how to spell it once, you kind of don't forget it, as its name is that unusual. And it definitely is an extremely useful creature. Obviously, as you can see, it can travel across the map with insane speeds, and it deals a pretty reasonable amount of damage as well, which you can't get out of every great traveling mount. But the Managama definitely is great for that, and like I said as well, it is great at freezing creatures, and in a moment you will see what it is like when it does freeze creatures. The only thing you really have to watch out for though is this thing is extremely buggy and will get stuck on things, and it just did get stuck on something there. In terms of it freezing, it will freeze creatures for a very, very long amount of time, which is why it is heavily used by PvP griefers. I've heard not as much anymore since they got nerfed, but they still get used a little bit in terms of PvP griefing still to this day. Now, the Rock Drake is pretty similar to the Managama in a lot of things, but I think it is slightly more unusual, partly because it did come first. Obviously, Operation was the map that came up before Extinction, and also just the way that this creature is formed is a little bit more unusual. This is kind of like a somewhat T-Rexy chicken I don't really know where those two creatures came from. But I would just call it kind of a T-Rexy, chickeny, turkey thing. Again, I don't really know where I'm going with that. It is so unusual in the form that it is. You can't really relate it to other creatures, which is very, very weird, and definitely a sign which it is very unusual. But its taming method isn't particularly one of the most unusual, like you would expect from this creature. It is the exact same as the wyvern. You simply steal the egg from the rock drake nest, and then boom, once you've obviously incubated and raised up that creature, you have yourself a rock drake. And also they do come in a lot of colours as well, this pink being an example, which is actually quite weird for a lot of Ark creatures, as most creatures do follow a similar colour pattern, whereas the rock drake has a wealth of colours. And I actually kind of really like the tealy blue more than the colour which I've got here. I like a tealy blue, like a bluey green is what I kind of like on a wyvern, not a wyvern, this is a rock drake. Why am I talking about wyverns? In terms of rock drake colour, that is my preference. What is your rock drake colour? Comment in the comments down below. Don't know why I said comment too many times in the sentence, but comment in the comments down below. What is your favourite rock drake colour? As I'd really like to know. Mine is definitely that kind of like bluey, greeny thing, but you know, some of you may be digging this pink and purple, which we got here. No, it's not pink and purple. Pink and blue. I may be slightly colourblind. In at number 5 is the gas bags, and this is just a creature which is such an oddity. And also, I'm seriously questioning Wildcard here. How did they come up with the idea for this? Or did we come up with the idea for this? Honestly, I don't know, but somehow this thing was created, and it's been in the game since extinction, and I don't really get how it came around or how the idea came for it. It's literally a farting gas animal which flies on its own gas. It's a very, very weird premise, but actually a very cool creature which doesn't require a saddle. The saddle's only there if you have friends, unlike me, because I don't really have friends I play Ark with, or friends in general, you know, living that life. But that saddle is there if you do have friends, unlike any YouTuber which you can really think of. Us YouTubers, yeah, we don't really get the friends. This is why we do YouTube, you know. But if you do have friends, then your friend can go on the saddle, and then you can travel together, which is nice, you know. The Diplodocus has a significantly higher passenger count, but that's not on the list because that isn't a very interesting or unusual creature. Anyway, I should stop talking about the Diplodocus. What's actually good about the gas bags? Well, on extinction, this is actually one of the best creatures out there for gathering metal. Obviously, you still have the RG, and the gas bags is significantly harder to control than the RG, but it is a lot cuter. And it's just, I like using the creatures which came on that map. And I'll always try to use the gas bags, as long as I can control it at the time, to do some metal runs. And once you learn it, it is a really, really great creature for doing those metal runs. If you don't just get stuck in a trench with loads of wyverns and get killed a couple of times. That happened because I forgot to enable creative mode stupidly for this B-roll. But, you know, editing, it looks like I did nothing wrong and I escaped perfectly. But there was multiple attempts in this, and then I flew too high and I got up caught into the world border. I am definitely not a great pilot of the gas bags. Also, if you find yourself like this, make sure to dismount just before you hit the ground. It will save you. Now, the Rhinoganatha, I think, came from us. It was from some kind of creature voting thing anyway, and we did vote for this creature to be in the game, and it is one of the more unusual ones. There isn't any other Ark creature which is really like this thing. And also, I know loads of people are saying Rhinoganathas are rare, and I get that they're rare. On ASA at the moment, I've seen about 5 Rhinoganathas in the swamp biome. Is there an overspawn of Rhinoganathas on ASA? Wildcard, can you tell me please, if you're watching this video, because I've had way too many encounters with this thing. I've seen 1 Giga, and I've seen 5 Rhinoganathas, and these things are generally a lot rarer than a Giga, as they only spawn in one specific biome, whereas Gigas can spawn on several places around the map. In terms of the Rhinoganatha's uses though, this thing is essentially just an upgraded Quetz, which is a lot faster and deals more damage. As unlike a Quetz, it will deal more damage. It is significantly harder to tame and uses the taming method, which the Reaper has, which I'll talk about because the Reaper is ahead on this list. Oh my god, spoilers. But either way, the Reaper is ahead on this list, so I'll talk about its taming method similarly there. But you can always check out my Rhinoganatha taming guide if you want to know fully, in detail, how to tame this thing. And you'll see brief b-roll of me actually taming it, because this is from the guide video. I was just a little bit lazy at the time, and I was just like, I'll take my guide video and then I'll just chuck that into b-roll, which is obviously why you're seeing me tame it here, and you're not seeing me tame every other Ark creature in all of the other b-rolls. But it is a very long and arduous taming process, which is extremely difficult and requires 2 Rhino Ganathas, not 1. You're going to need 2 of those things, and you're going to need a pheromone, you're going to need to kill one, and then yeah, there's so much. Just check out the tutorial. I really shouldn't talk about it more. The Rhino Ganatha is just one of those creatures which is really unusual, and we voted for, and for some reason spawns way too much on ASA. Have no idea why, but it does. This is the Rhino Ganatha. It's one of Ark's most unusual tames. The spoiler is here, with the Reaper being in at number 3, and the Reaper is a even more unusual tame than the Rhino Ganatha, as obviously it came way before. The Rhino Ganatha is the most recent creature which has been added to Ark, apart from the Phasmosuchus. Don't know if that is in ASA at the moment, but I'm going to count that as the most recent Ark creature. Is that thing coming to Scorched Earth or the island? Either way, it might not be here yet, so don't take my word on that one. Not quite sure. That may be a Scorched Earth creature. Actually, thinking about it, that is a Scorched Earth creature. The Rhino Ganatha was the one for the island. Yes, the Rhino Ganatha is the latest creature of Ark at the moment. And the Reaper has obviously been in Ark for ages. It came out in Operation. That was way back in 2017. And this thing was such an oddity at the time, but it really fits into that map, and its taming method is one of the most unusual in the game. Essentially what you do is you'll get a Reaper Queen to a really low amount of health. You can use a trap for this, it will make it so much easier, and you can use light pets as well. Not for the other bit of the taming method though, as that won't work with a light pet. You can't have a light pet when this thing impregnates you when you go up to it after you put its health down. At least I'm pretty sure you can't. Don't anyway, as it may somewhat fail, as the Reapers really do not like light pets. But after you have been impregnated by the Reaper, obviously after you damaged it and the impregnation has occurred, you just get a ton of XP, and then boom, you have yourself a Reaper. In at number 2 is the Bloodstalker, and this is just essentially a spider with, I don't think 8 eyes, but it may have 8 eyes, or it may have 12. Honestly, comment down below how many eyes the Bloodstalker has, as right now I don't know. I'm sure I could look up an image, but I know one of you out there knows the answer to this. Well, obviously you can tell why the Bloodstalker is so unusual. No other Ark creature is really like this, and you could say the Aranio is another kind of spidery thing, but that is just kind of like a normal spider. The Bloodstalker is like a vampire, blood-sucking Spider-Man thing with an obscene amount of eyes. It may be 8, it may be 12, I'm not quite sure. Make sure to let me know. I want to know how many eyes the Bloodstalker has, as I'm really not sure, as I have not seen one up close and personal for a while. But also, this thing's taming method is very much an oddity. Like no other Ark creature, apart from the Desmodus, obviously, off the top of my head, which I can think of, has the same taming method. You essentially get blood bags, which it will need to syringe out of your body, or you can obviously use the Desmodus to harvest them now, but originally you just had to use the blood syringe to get those, and then it will just eat those, and then you'll tame yourself a Bloodstalker, and you can feed it some creatures before to get 100% effectiveness. But honestly, I've never bothered with that, as I'm not going to do like insane things with this creature. Like, I'm not going to fight bosses with the Bloodstalker. I just want a good one. And obviously for missions, you're not even going to need a Bloodstalker, but it is good to get one, obviously, so you can get to those missions, so you can get all of those hexagons. But before you get a Bloodstalker, you should definitely go to the Bogrish missions to practice. And finally, in at number 1 is the Velonosaur. And the reason why I have put this thing in at number 1 isn't because it has the weirdest taming method or anything along those lines. It is just, there has never been any kind of creature like the Velonosaur apart from the Velonosaur. I can think of no other Ark creature like this tame. And albeit, yes, it does have one of the simplest taming methods out of all of the creatures on the list. It is just a very simple knockout tame. No other Ark creature compares to this thing in terms of what it is. This thing, again, is just a moving turret, and there's no other creature which does this like the Velonosaur. And sadly, the damage of the turrets doesn't scale with melee, but obviously you can keep leveling up that stamina to shoot even more turrets out. And obviously I wouldn't recommend it in this close of a proximity, but it is definitely an extremely useful thing, which when you ride this thing you will use a lot. But it also does have your general just attack, hack and slash, and it also can shake spines off of it as well. And also, I think when you look at it head on when it's shooting turrets, it's a little bit creepy. That animation, just to me, is a little bit on the creepy side. In at number 10 is the Mosa. It is a powerful aquatic mount. The Mosasaurus is a massive, powerful aquatic dinosaur that serves as an exceptional underwater mount. It has high health, stamina, and damage output, making it a formidable force in underwater combat. Underwater exploration. With its ability to navigate underwater depths, the Mosasaurus allows players to explore the ocean depths safely. It can travel quickly and cover vast distances underwater, which is particularly useful for reaching underwater caves and high resource rich areas. And for combat superiority, the Mosa's high base damage and health make it a dominant force against other aquatic creatures, including other formidable predators like the plesiosaur or the Lezichthyes. This makes it a valuable asset for defending underwater bases or engaging in underwater battles. Right, next up we have the Yutyrannus, and the main good thing about this is its leadership roar. The Yutyrannus has a special ability called the Courage Roar or Fear Roar. When it roars, it gives a buff to nearby allied creatures, boosting their attack power and resistance to fear effects. This can be incredibly useful in battles or when taming other creatures, making them stronger and more resilient. Then they also have utility in battles, due to which Courage Roar ability, the Yutyrannus becomes a valuable asset in battles against other creatures or players. The buff it provides to nearby creatures can turn the tide in challenging encounters, making it a significant asset in PvP, player versus player, or PvE, player versus environment scenarios. It also plays a role in taming assistance. When taming other creatures, especially those that are difficult or have torpor-inducing effect, the Yutyrannus can help by buffing the taming creature's damage output and resistance, making the taming process safer and faster. While the Yutyrannus can't fly, it can be ridden and controlled. Its decent speed and ability to provide buffs while being riding make it a versatile and valuable mount for various situations. And it also has pack buffs. When used in conjunction with other creatures, the Yutyrannus' buffs can stack onto other pack leader creatures, amplifying the bonuses give to the allied creatures, creating a formidable force. Next up we have the RG. Firstly, to do with transportation, the RG has a decent flight speed and stamina, making it a reliable creature for transportation. It can carry out a considerable amount of weight, allowing players to transport resources, creatures, or even other smaller dinosaurs across long distances. Combat utility. While not the most powerful combat creature, the RG is quite effective in battles due to its decent health pool, stamina, and melee damage. Its ability to fly allows it to attack from the air, making it useful for hunting, defending, or even assisting in taming other creatures. Resource gathering. Argentavis can be trained to harvest various resources efficiently. They're particularly good at gathering renewable resources such as hide, meat, and organic polymer from certain creatures. With their ability to carry large amounts, they can expedite resource gathering trips. Its ability to carry other creatures in its talons makes it useful for taming or relocating smaller creatures. This feature is especially handy when players want to tame creatures in challenging or dangerous areas and then transport them to a safer location for taming. Accessibility. The RG is relatively easier to obtain compared to some of the other flying creatures in the game. They're commonly found in various regions that can be tamed using a variety of foods, making them accessible for players at different levels. And base defense and utility. Due to their decent combat capabilities, Argentavis can be trained and used to defend a base or assist in resource gathering around the player's settlement, providing them an extra layer of security. In at number 7 is the Therii, and the first thing we can say is its gathering efficiency. One of the primary reasons for the Therizinosaur's popularity is its outstanding gathering capabilities. It excels at gathering a wide variety of resources such as wood, thatch, fiber, berries, and rare flowers efficiently. This makes it a valuable asset for resource gathering, especially for wood and thatch, which are essential building materials. Combat prowess. The Therizinosaur is a formidable combatant with high base damage and a rapid attack rate. When properly leveled and equipped, it can be effective in both defensive and offensive roles. Its ability to gather resources also makes it easier to collect the materials needed for saddles and gear, enhancing its combat capabilities further. To do with decent health and versatility, Therizinosaurs have a good base health pool, making them durable in battles, and additionally, they can be bred for higher stats, making them even more resilient. Their versatility in both gathering and combat makes them a desirable choice for many players. Herbivore and berry gathering. With its ability to efficiently gather berries, the Therizinosaur becomes valuable for players needing large quantities of berries for taming herbivores, creatures, or crafting consumables. Kibble production. They have the ability to collect large amounts of eggs from various creatures, making them ideal for egg farming and kibble production. Kibble kibble is an important resource for efficiently taming higher tier creatures. In at number 6 we have the Spino. It is a powerful all-rounder. The Spinosaurus is a well-rounded creature with a high base damage, health and speed. Its versatile stats make it effective in various situations including combat, resource gathering and exploration. It is an excellent swimmer. Spinos are able to move swiftly through waterways and traverse both shallow and deeper waters without issue. This amphibious nature allows them to excel in aquatic environments and explore underwater areas. The gathering capability makes them a proficient gatherer, especially for specific resources like meat and hide. Their attacks yield substantial amounts of meat and hide from any creatures that they defeat, making them valuable for collecting these resources efficiently. They also have combat superiority. Again, Spinos are powerful combatants with a unique attack animation that covers a wide area, allowing them to deal damage to multiple enemies at once. Their high base health makes them formidable opponents in battles against both land and aquatic creatures. Also, they have accessibility and a taming ease. A Spino can be found in various regions across the Ark map, making them very relatively accessible to any kind of Ark player. While they might require some effort to tame during their strength, they can be tamed using meat, fish, and become valuable assets once tamed. Despite their large size, Spinos move relatively quickly, both in land and in water. This agility allows players to maneuver effectively during combat or exploration, making them useful for traveling across different terrains. And Spinos are often used in boss fights due to their high damage output and durability. Their versatility makes them suitable for various boss encounters, adding to their value in high-end game content. Overall, the Spinosaurus' combination of high stats, versatility, speed, combat prowess, and resource gathering abilities make it highly sought after and a valuable creature in Ark Survival Evolved for both solo players and tribes. In at number 5 we have the Megalodon, and the main thing they have is the Megalodons are relatively fast underwater and have good stamina. They allow players to explore the ocean depths and travel across water bodies efficiently. They can serve as reliable mounts for underwater exploration due to their speed and maneuverability. Also, in the early to mid stages of the game, before obtaining higher tier aquatic mounts like the Mosa or the Plesio, the Megalodon can be a valuable aquatic mount due to its moderate strength, ease of taming, and availability in various parts of the map. However, compared to some of the larger aquatic creatures like the Mosasaurus or the Plesiosaur, the Megalodon might lack in raw power and durability that the higher tier creatures possess. As players gain progress in the game, they might not opt for a less potent creature like the Megalodon. So why AI did you put this thing in at number 5 and the Mosa in at number 10? You really don't make sense. Well, ultimately, the Megalodon might not be as powerful as some other aquatic creatures, but its speed, accessibility, and early game utility make it like the best. It says the best ocean tame. Next up, we have the Golem or the Rock Elemental, and the main thing they have is durability and tankiness. Rock Elementals can possess an incredibly high base health pool and natural armor, making them one of the most resilient creatures in the game. They can absorb a significant amount of damage from both creatures and structures, serving as formidable tanks in battles or as defenders for bases. They also are potent attackers capable of dealing substantial damage to both creatures and structures. Their rock throwing ability allows them to attack enemies from a distance, making them an effective siege creature in raiding scenarios. They also have the ability to gather large quantities of stone and similar resources by smacking rocks with their attacks. This makes them invaluable for resource gathering, especially for stone, flint, and metal, which are essential for crafting and building. Placing a rock elemental within a base can act as a significant deterrent for potential attackers. Their immense health pool and damage output make them powerful defenders against raiders or hostile creatures. In PvP scenarios, golems are highly sought after for their ability to deal significant damage to enemy structures. Their rock throwing attack allows them to damage structures from a distance, making them effective siege creatures in raids. However, its movement speed is a bit of a downside. In at number 3, we have the Quetz. It is an aerial platform. The Quetzal serves as a flying platform capable of carrying massive amounts of weight in its platform saddle, which allows players to build structures on its back, essentially turning it into a mobile base. This feature is invaluable for base building, resource transportation, and mobile operations. It also is very versatile. The Quetzal's combination of flying ability, high weight capacity, and the platform saddle makes it one of the most versatile creatures in the game. It can be utilized for various tasks including base building, resource gathering, taming, combat, and transportation. Due to this exceptional versatility and usefulness across multiple aspects of gameplay, the Quetzal is a highly prized and sought after Ark creature by many players and tribes in the Ark Survival Evolved game, and its unique abilities serve as a mobile platform, carry other creatures, transport heavy loads, and engage in combat, make it an indispensable asset in the game. What a lovely thing to say about a creature this slow. In at number 2, we have the Giga. The Giganotosaurus boasts incredibly high base damage and health stats, making it one of the strongest land creatures in the game. Its damage output surpasses most other creatures, allowing it to decimate opponents quickly. Gigas are highly sought after in PvP scenarios due to their devastating combat abilities. They can deal massive damage to structures and creatures, making them an exceptional siege creature during raids or base defenses. Gigas are massive creatures, instilling fear in both players and AI-controlled creatures. Their large size and aggressive nature makes them formidable adversaries in battles and excellent deterrents for potential attackers. Also, despite their immense strength, Gigas are also efficient gatherers, particularly for meat and hide. Their attacks yield substantial amounts of resources from the creatures they defeat, making them very useful for harvesting. Gigas are often considered endgame creatures due to their power level, and they can play a significant role in late game activities, including raiding, boss battles, and establishing dominance on the server. Overall, the Giganotosaurus' unparalleled strength, combat prowess, intimidation factor, and significance in the endgame content make it highly sought after and a feared creature in Ark Survival Evolved, often playing a crucial role in dominating the game's landscape. And in at number 1 is the Rex. Rexes possess high base health and damage stats, making them formidable fighters. They are strong attackers and can deal significant damage to both creatures and structures, making them excellent combat mounts. Due to their strength and health, Rexes are often used in various combat scenarios, including hunting other creatures, defending bases, engaging in boss fights, or raiding enemy bases. Their high damage output makes them valuable assets in confrontations. Rexes are relatively easier to tame compared to some of the higher other creatures, like the Giga for example. They serve as an effective combat mount themselves and can also be used to assist in taming other creatures due to their strength and damage output. Rexes are commonly used in boss fights due to their high damage output, durability, and effectiveness against bosses in caves or arenas. They're often a crucial part of strategies for taking down challenging boss creatures in Ark. Rexes can be found in various regions across the Ark map, making them relatively accessible for taming. Players can encounter them in many different biomes, and the relatively straightforward taming process makes them available for players at different stages of the game. When multiple Rexes are present, they gain a pack bonus that increases their damage output, making them even more lethal in battles. This pack boost can significantly enhance effectiveness in group combat scenarios. In both PvP and PvE situations, Rexes are highly valued for their combat capabilities. They can be used for base defense, raiding, battling other players or tribes, and dominating the game's environment. While not specialized gatherers, the Rexes can collect decent amount of hide, meat, and keratin from creatures they defeat, making them useful for resource gathering. Overall, the Rexes' combination of high health, damage output, accessibility, ease of taming, versatility in various gameplay scenarios makes it one of the sought-after Ark creatures. Not really sure about that pack buff though. 10 Ark creatures which are extremely overused. In at number 10 is the Rhinoganatha. Now, ever since this thing released, this has been an absolute boom in any Ark PvP player's life, and it has just been used so much to absolutely decimate PvP bases with its wealth of abilities and the fact they can pick up creatures like Rexes and just steal loads and loads of enemy creatures during raids. And at this point, the Rhinoganatha has become a bit of a problem in the PvP Ark space, as it is just so much more OP than pretty much every other creature in the game for that one specific use case, that is just really unbalanced. And many people are questioning why this will be in ASA from day one, since Ark is kind of going for a bit more of a primitive theme now, and it is definitely leaning further towards that. And again, tech will be at the start of ASA 2, but that doesn't mean the Rhinoganatha is a bad creature at all, and I can say that for all of the creatures on this list actually, as all of these creatures on this list are good creatures. It's just I think they are overused a bit too much. But I would say largely the taming method is pretty fair, but I would say in future definitely Wildcard should debuff this thing, as right now it is just so unbalanced and it is so OP for PvP, which could be a good thing to quite a lot of people, but it is also a really bad thing, as you do want a lot of balance in those scenarios, as those alphas of the server are just going to get themselves a Ragnarok and absolutely decimate everyone else on the server, so no one else can actually have a good time. In at number 9 is the Pteranodon. Now again, the Pteranodon is a great creature, but I think largely it is overused a lot for a lot of things, and yes, it does fit those use cases very well, especially for raids in PvP, but in my opinion there are better flyers out there that if you just put a little bit more effort into, you will have a significantly better flyer. The Crystal Wyvern is one for an example. Yes, you do need to get up to level 65 instead of 38 to ride that, but it is a much better tame, and if you do a very basic note run, you can get there pretty quickly and it won't really be too much of an effort. Definitely something I would recommend. Even though other maps do not have Crystal Wyverns, if you're on Crystal Isles, definitely give that a shot. But on other maps as well, sometimes I just skip the Pteranodon altogether and just save up for an RG or a Tapejara. Just a flyer which I will actually appreciate much more. As in a PvE scenario, after you've got the RG, the Pteranodon pretty much just becomes obsolete, as the Tapejara can be your faster flyer there, or you could use something like the Pelagornis maybe, and obviously the RG is just going to be that 100% utility dino. The RG is an absolute insane dino for utility, and definitely a good one, and definitely another overused creature as well. But I say the Pteranodon still fits into that category too, as it does seem to be a creature which every Ark player does go for, but for good reason. But I do think there are some other flyers out there in Ark which can be tamed relatively early on in your Ark playing progress that will give you a much nicer experience than the Pteranodon. Next up is the Carcharodontosaurus. Now you can probably tell what I would say, this thing is an overused creature. This thing is an absolutely insane beast of a carnivore. Obviously loads of players are going to use it, and again there aren't too many other options than the Carcharodontosaurus for a creature of this size and skill level. But largely, I still think it is a bit of an overrated and overused dino, as it can't be used for bosses on every map. You'll need a creature like the Rex for that. And on Extinction, yes, it may be one of the best creatures out there for doing bosses, but just largely, it isn't a very useful creature, apart from, obviously, that combat. But again, I need to stress this enough, that does not mean it is a bad tame. And don't feel bad if you have tamed a Carcharodontosaurus, because I'm saying it is overrated in a way. Obviously it's overused, but it's still a very viable creature, and compared to a creature like the Ragnarok, it isn't as imbalanced in a PvP scenario, but definitely still extremely OP, as once it's in its blood rage, this thing will just rip through so many things and can definitely be a bit of an unbalance. And actually, I would like to see some less OP creatures in Ark in the future, as currently it just seems like we're getting loads of OP creatures and Ark is gradually getting even more unbalanced. Next up, we have the Giga, and again, this follows the same trail of thought as the Carcharodontosaurus. This is a big carnivore, which yes, is great on Extinction, but you can't take it into all of those boss fights. And overall, I would say the Giga is a worse creature than the Carcharodontosaurus, as it's slower, its stamina is worse, and obviously it has that blood rage. And it doesn't even have a bleed ability. Yes, wild ones do, but once tamed, it will lose that ability. And this was definitely a great creature back in 2016, and it added some absolute OPness to the game. That is definitely a very weird thing to say. OPness, insane, absolutely insane phrase. But either way, the Giganotosaurus is an extremely big carnivore, again, a very good one, but by many is extremely overused, especially in the PvP space. That is obviously partly just because there isn't too many other creatures like this, apart from the Carcharodontosaurus, but in my opinion, the Gigas are used a lot, like a lot, And there are some other creatures which can be extremely useful for the tasks that the Giga will do as well. And it can make everyone's Ark playing a bit better, especially those ones who are struggling a bit along the way, and they are just being absolutely decimated every day by the alphas of the server on Gigas or Carcharodontosaurus. So overall, yes, Ark is a very unbalanced game, and the Giga and the Carcharodontosaurus are definitely factors within that. Now, the Deinonychus. This is again an extremely useful creature which I do urge you to tame, but again fitting into that PvP Ark theme, this creature is extremely overused for so many things, and again there are some other creatures which you can use instead of this. And it is also partly just because of how OP these creatures are, except they aren't quite as OP as the Giga or Carcharodontosaurus, even though their bleed ability does work extremely well on bosses. But obviously, unlike when the Raptor had that pounce ability, which luckily was removed, but apart from on Arboration for some reason, yeah, that was extremely more worse than what the Deinonychus has to its name. But the Deinonychus, in my opinion, is still a very overused creature, and obviously for good reason. It's an extremely versatile creature. It can just travel really fast. It's a really nice creature. It inflicts a good amount of damage. It is just great at traversing across the map. But I do feel like now it's like, oh, the Deinonychus, and it just, people just go on about it for ages, and I do go on about it quite a lot as well. But the Deinonychus, in my opinion, is quite overused, and I would like to see some other creatures of similar role to the Deinonychus that other Ark players out there can use, as it can really spice up the gameplay, as again, just playing as the same creature every single time can get really boring and makes Ark even more unbalanced than it already is. So in my opinion, the Deinonychus is a pretty overused dinosaur. In at number 5 is the Maywing, and yes, my favourite creature in Ark has been put into the overused category, as in my opinion the Maywing is an overused one. Obviously not one that I will stop using, but again it is an extremely unbalanced creature as well, and hopefully some of these issues get fixed into ASA, and then all of them should be gone by the time Ark 2 hits. Whenever that is, there may even be more delays past 2025. And again, the Maywing is a really great tame which you can find on maps like Gen 2 and Fjorda, and it will make your life significantly easy. But I think nowadays Ark life is just so easy that it is just so unbalanced, and creatures like this are overused so much, which makes Ark a much easier game, which is better for new players starting out. But when the transition to ASA hits, there will be a huge reality shock, as the game is said to be much harder as the AI is getting improved and other things like that. And also movement speed is being removed as well, so no insanely fast dinos zipping across the map, or your insanely fast, weirdly discombobulated character zooming across the beaches. Now, the Shadow Mane, an extremely useful creature, again found on Gen 2 and Fjorda. Like the Maywing, they did obviously originate from the same map, and in my opinion, this is an even more overused creature than the Maywing, and again is an extremely OP one, which has a wealth of really great abilities. Again, like the hydration buff, it has pack buff, it has alpha buff, it just has pretty much anything, and it can charge its attack up over time, and it can even stun creatures. The list of the Shadow Mane's ability just goes on and on, and it is pretty much seemingly endless. The Shadow Mane is again an extremely useful creature, one of which I urge you to tame at some point in Gen 2 or on Fjorda. Obviously you'll need to prepare for this a lot though, as the tame for the Shadow Mane can be really annoying, and it is not an easy one, although some of you out there have said, oh, the Shadow Mane's a really easy tame. But especially for those people who haven't tamed a Shadow Mane before, a Shadow Mane is not an easy tame, but I do urge you to tame one at some point. In at number 3 is the Reaper. Now this creature is a significantly older one than the others that are found on this list, but also one which is extremely overused, obviously like all the other creatures which you will find on this list. And the Reaper is especially useful in PvP, as it is just a really fast, quick, agile creature that can just get the job done. It will deal all the damage necessary, it will absolutely decimate all of the creatures in the area. These things can easily take out Gigas, like no problems at all, and then they can just raid the base and then just get out. And again, it's leaning into Ark's balance again, as now with all of the transfers over many maps, the balance of Ark is definitely thrown off, and I wouldn't mind if you weren't able to transfer across maps, and the creatures on every map were built to be used on said map, and then it was so balanced for that map. Tell me down below if you agree with that, or you prefer to just transfer the most OP creatures over from other maps. Yet again, talking about Ark being an unbalanced game. But what would you expect? It has built up significantly since its release in 2015. All the way now, it's over 8 years old, which seems absolutely insane now. And yes, you can definitely see why it's an unbalanced game, but the Reaper is 100% a contributor to griefing on PvP. In at number 2 is the Rock Drake. Now, obviously, the Rock Drake is going to be an overused creature, like the Reaper. But why is it more overused than the Reaper? And that is mainly just because this thing is significantly faster than the Reaper, and it is just more agile and more stealthy, which is why it is better for PvP than the Reaper, apart from just completely, absolutely decimating bases by brute force. And you'll see many people in the PvP space going around on Rock Drakes or Managarmas, so I'm kind of going to include the Managarma in the number 2 spot as well, kind of as a little honorable mention there, as the Managarma is an extremely used PvP tame, which is extremely overused. And the Managarma at this point is probably one of my least favourite tames because of how much it has been griefed on with PvP. But either way, back to the Rock Drake, like the Managarma, is just a stealthy, quick creature which can zip across the map with ultimate speed and just decimate everyone. And essentially, this creature, to all of the noobs out there, can just ruin your day completely. And obviously, it's meant to be a late game creature, but when you're interacting with other players on this thing and just absolutely griefing them, this thing is just so OP compared to anything they could imagine using, that the progress is pretty much just set back to naught for them, which is obviously why I'm not really an Ark PvP player, as I'm not really into the progression of just losing all my stuff and building back up again, even though I will say the combat is pretty fun. The Rock Drake is definitely an overused tame, which I wouldn't mind getting some sort of nerf in the future, but I'm sure many of you out there would be very unhappy with that. And finally, in at number 1 is the Rex. Now, what would you expect? The Rex is by far one of the most used Ark creatures out there, and definitely one which every single Ark player will look up to when they start playing. The Rex, by far, is one of the most well-known dinosaurs out there, and it is no lie that many Ark players will go after the Rex because of just how cool they think it is, and it definitely is a very useful creature in the space of Ark, being one of the best for bosses because unlike the Giga and the Carcharodontosaurus, it can be let into bosses, and it is an extremely balanced creature with no kind of things that will make the creature rage or get out of control. It's got a great health stat, it's got a great melee stat, although its mobility and stamina and weight aren't great. You do not need that for combat. But by now, you can definitely tell why the Rex is an overused creature. If every Ark player started Ark and tamed a Rex, there would be a lot of Rexes that people would have tamed, and pretty much every Ark player that has started Ark and made significant progress, meaning that they've played probably at least an in-game week or in-game month of Ark, then they would have tamed a Rex at some point. And they're not really a difficult tame, they're widespread across pretty much all of Ark on every map, and they're just easy again, they're just quick, they're not very difficult, and they're not very expensive tames either, which is definitely why they are so popular and, in my opinion, extremely overused. Ark's top 10 most underrated tames. In at number 10 is the Angler. Now, this thing was released way back, and I do definitely fondly remember this thing from Squid's old Ark series, and his last episode on the Bongoman's Island map was taming the anglerfish, and still to this day this is actually a pretty useful creature for some certain specific Ark tasks, especially with their silica pearl gathering abilities, and that is pretty much all they have going for them. But silica pearls, if you didn't know already, are an extremely useful Ark resource, so that is why they are an extremely useful Ark creature which many people don't talk or even tame at all, and they just don't question it as a creature. They'll always go for something else. And yes, there are better sea creatures out there, but the angler is great earlier on to mid-game stages in Ark, where you can't fully shell out for the most powerful ocean tames, but you still want to farm all of those silica pearls to get your fabrication up to the max. These creatures are really worth a tame at some point, as they aren't difficult at all, and they are extremely useful for gathering up all of those silica pearls. In at number 9 is the Chalacatherium. Now you may think this creature is just utterly useless, or you may think this creature is an absolutely insane tame and 100% worth it. And I'm kind of leaning more onto that side, as this creature does have a lot of abilities which many other creatures don't have. And also, the Chalacatherium has an absolutely insane knockback attack, and it is just a generally good creature for just dealing a lot of damage. It's a bit like a slightly worse Megatherium, which really does pack a punch, and it actually is a very decent travel mount as well. It has a very respectable speed stat, one of what you will not complain with at all, and it does have a wealth of other abilities as well, like it being able to throw literal rocks of, I think, even feces at the enemy player. But this ability will take some time to actually practice and get right, as it is a somewhat difficult ability to control, but when done right, it is a really fun, cool ability, which does have many uses as well, as it essentially makes this thing a long-range fighting dinosaur, which many other Ark creatures simply do not have. The only one I can really think of off of hand is the Velonosaur's turret ability. In at number 8 is the Carbenemies. Now I know this will be a somewhat unpopular opinion among many of you, but in my opinion, my personal opinion, I really do enjoy the Carbenemies in the early stages of my Ark playing. In those early stages, it is extremely useful to get yourself a creature that can grind all of that oil and those silica pearls and all of those underwater resources. Yes, I will definitely agree this isn't the best creature out there to gather all of those berries and just harvest general things, as I'm pretty sure this thing can't even gather berries, but if it can, it is still an extremely slow Ark creature, which isn't great on land at all. But when it comes into the water, the Carbenemies does actually have some reasonable speed. And yes, just for reference, this B-roll does have some boosted speed on the Carbenemies, as I think it just looks really funny. And it definitely is really funny in my opinion. Comment down below if you think a really fast Carbenemies waggling its little legs really quickly is funny. You know, some people do, and I'm definitely one of those people. But yes, as you can see here in the B-roll, this is me going to gather some oil from the kind of depths of the ocean. Not obviously right to the bottom, as that wouldn't be great, as your player would simply run out of oxygen. As the time when you're getting the Carbenemies, you will not have the scuba tank. I'm pretty confident you won't. So yeah, you can always go into those lakes and lower lying rivers, and there you'll find some oil and definitely some silica pearls, and that is where I think the Carbenemies really shines the most. In at number 7 is the Beelzebufo. Now I know loads of people on my channel really do not feel as if the Beelzebufo is underrated, and they extremely love this creature, and they think it is one of the most popular Ark creatures. And among quite a lot of Ark players, the Beelzebufo is definitely very popular for its cementing paste gathering abilities. But the fact is, a lot of Ark players as well simply discount the Beelzebufo, and I was one of them before I tried it, as they will just simply say beaver dams are the most efficient way to gather cementing paste, and there isn't a point of spending all of that time to get yourself one of these absolutely amazing, charming Ark frogs, which now obviously I have turned my opinion over is simply not the case. In insect caves like the one on the island, the Beelzebufo really does shine, and you can gather thousands and thousands of cementing paste. And with Ark being a buggy game as well, sometimes beaver dams don't even spawn and can be an absolute nuisance to find. So knowing that you can literally just find some insects on a Beelzebufo to get that cementing paste is actually extremely useful as well, where you just can't find beaver dams and you just can't find that cementing paste. The Beelzebufo is definitely the best creature out there for reliable, quick cementing paste gathering. In at number 6 is the Casteroides. Now again, you may be kind of on the edge like the Beelzebufo with this creature, as you may either love it or hate it. These creatures do seem to be quite Marmite creatures, as you may just not see the use in taming a Casteroides. But before you have the chainsaw in Ark, the Casteroides is one of the best creatures for gathering wood. And you all know wood is a resource which you will need a lot of throughout the game. Right from the beginning all the way to the end stages of the Ark game, you will need all of that wood. The amount of wood that you will need in one Ark map playthrough is absolutely insane, and the beaver will really help you to actually get you there. And also the beaver is an extremely fast creature as well, and great in the water too, so it is a sort of upgrade to the carb enemies if you still can't get a creature that is underwater capable that actually spawns in the water, like the Megalodon or Ichthyosaurus or Plesiosaurus or Mosasaurus, which you may not have at the stage when you'll be taming these things. And also on top of that, they have an extra little special spicy ability as well, which makes them really nice to use. The fact is, their saddle is just a really nice portable smithy, extremely useful. In at number 5 is the Spinosaurus, and what a creature this is, and also in my opinion, what an underrated carnivore, as the Rex always seems to take the spotlight away from the Spinosaurus. And in my opinion, the Spinosaurus is pretty much what a Rex is, and in some cases it can be easier to tame, as it does spawn in less hostile environments, and it definitely has a lot of really great uses that the Rex simply can't partake in. Firstly, it has a really amazing turning circle, which the Rex simply can't compete with, as it can turn 360 on the spot, whereas the Rex's turning circle is absolutely atrocious, and in many situations it is so bad you can even get your Rex killed because it can't turn around and attack the creature that is attacking by its feet. Also, the Spinosaurus is great in the water too, and I'm pretty sure it does have an oxygen stat, even though it may not as well. I'm kind of a bit in between. It may have had one in the past and now it doesn't. Either way, its oxygen stat is really great, and it is a great underwater creature with creatures like the Baryonyx, the Mosasaurus, the Plesiosaurus, the Basilosaurus. The list literally goes on for underwater creatures, and unlike most underwater creatures, and pretty much every creature apart from this and the Shadowmane, it has the hydration buff, so it will do even more damage when in water, which is just simply great, as with any carnivore, you always like to have a buff. Sadly, it does not have the bleed ability, but still, that hydration buff is absolutely OP, and when it goes back onto its hind legs, this thing will do even more damage on top of that. It is definitely a great boss creature, and actually overall, I'm pretty sure it does more damage than the Rex, as it can attack faster, and I think its damage stat is higher. Its only real downside is its health is slightly worse than something like a Rex. In at number 4 is the Baryonyx. Now, this creature is definitely one of my favorites, and one creature that I will never forget in my Ark journey, and I'm surprised that so many other people don't talk about this to the extent that I do. And yes, it is not the most underrated creature out there, but I definitely think every single Ark player should have a Baryonyx in their roster of creatures, and they should know how to tame one effectively, efficiently, and know how to use one effectively as well. Yes, Shadowmanes are really great for caves now, but still the Baryonyx is my go-to 100%, as obviously its size means that this thing can fit into pretty much any cave. And compared to the Shadowmane, I'm just more used to using the Baryonyx, and yes, it may not be quite as versatile in terms of travel. In my opinion, this thing is still extremely useful and deserves a use, even though in some cases it is somewhat overtaken by the Shadowmane. Except the Shadowmane doesn't have the secret little ability that the Baryonyx has hidden up its sleeve. When it's in the water, it can literally stun creatures if you press C. And yes, the Shadowmane may have the hydration buff and things like that. The Shadowmane is a really great creature, don't get me wrong. It's just for things like caving and underwater exploration, I will always go Baryonyx before Shadowmane. And I would urge you to do that too. And also, they are a lot more accessible than the Shadowmane, as they do spawn on the island. Yes, I know the Shadowmane can be found on Fjorda, at least I'm pretty sure it can be found on Fjorda. So it is free to every Ark player out there, apart from Switch, I think doesn't have Fjorda yet, and obviously mobile doesn't. But on spawning on the island, it really does mean that this creature is the most accessible that it can be. Definitely worth the tame. In at number 3 is the Allosaurus. Yet again, another carnivore, which some people again may say they use all the time. But I really think the Allosaurus does not get the press that it really deserves, like the Spinosaurus and the Barry, as the Allo is by far one of the best boss creatures in Ark in general. And yes, the Rex may have more health, but the Allosaurus does an extremely immense amount of damage in packs, and it is just by far one of the most useful combat creatures in Ark. And with its pack buff, which obviously it will get from being in a pack, it can be buffed even more than a Rex can. And if you combine that with UT buffs on top of that, and the Daedon healing everything, you can have yourself a really, really great boss environment with Allos. And if you do breeding and mutations, you can have yourself an absolutely insane pack of Allos. And they don't tend to be as absolutely mind-bogglingly stupid as a Rex. These things will pretty much never get stuck on anything in the Ark terrain. And also, if you're doing the Overseer on the island, I would probably recommend bringing Allos, as getting through the tech cave with Rexes, just those Rexes, man, they will just get stuck in the lava and they will just die, and they'll just fall in the most stupid places, and it is really, really infuriating trying to retrieve them. So I will always use something like the Allo or the Spino if I'm feeling like it for the Overseer boss on the island. And I've only used Rexes once, and I completely regret it, as pretty much all of my army was killed in the tech cave, as all of the Rexes just decided, I don't want to live anymore, and I'm just going to jump straight into that lava. But obviously the Allo does not have any of those issues, and unlike the Rex, it has the all famous bleed ability. Definitely a carnivore to be proud and worth taming. In at number 2 is the Mantis. Now again, this is one of Ark's most accessible creatures, with this thing spawning on maps like Ragnarok. And yes, albeit it may not have the easiest taming method out there, requiring you to passive feed it woolly rhino horns on Ragnarok, or you can use Deathworm horns as well, and you will have to use Deathworm horns on the original map that it came on, which is Scorched Earth. And I get that many people do recognize the Mantis out there, but like the others, I really think everyone should have a Mantis in their roster, as some people may think it's just weak, useless, not worth it. Why even bother with all the prep and all of that just effort to get yourself some really good Mantises? And to that, I would say they are extremely great harvesters, and on a map like Ragnarok, these are by far the go-to creature for gathering all of that mutton up. And they're definitely really fun harvesters to use as well. And pretty much any melee weapon that you can think of, apart from tech melee weapons, I'm pretty sure, these things will be able to wield and use to such a high level of ability. The only real downside to using a Mantis with your tools is the durability factor to it. But if you have Ascendant tools, then you will have a really great time, as those weapons are not going to break as often. The Mantis is definitely a tame every Ark player should have in their roster, and one every Ark player should tame, and in my opinion, it doesn't get the support that it actually really needs. And finally, in at number 1 is the Carnotaurus. Now, many people wouldn't have expected this thing to be in the number 1 slot, but in my opinion, the Carno is my favorite carnivore in Ark. Yes, I prefer it even above the Baryonyx. The amount of nostalgia I have with this creature and the amount of success I have had with this creature is absolutely insane. And when I did Genesis 1 for the first time, I beat the Master Controller, albeit on Gamma, with the Carnotauruses, and it went extremely well, and it was an extremely fun and useful boss fight for me to have. The Carnotauruses are actually a very viable boss creature, albeit they won't do what a Rex, a Spino, or an Allo can.
they are still a really good middleman for doing those gamma boss fights, and you can definitely push for beta and alpha depending on what the fight is, just maybe not with the master controller. And did you also know that Carnotaurus, translated from Latin into English, means meatball, which is why I always call my Carnotauruses meatball, partly because it sounds funny, but also it is just accurate to what Carnotaurus actually means. Also, since the Carnotaurus' release, this thing has been TLC'd, now having a second attack where it will headbutt the enemy creature and deal that all-famous bleed ability, which only one other creature on this list so far, being the Allosaurus, actually has. And again, this is something that something like the Spino or the Rex doesn't have, which is why it is extremely useful to have yourself a Carnotaurus, and as always, call this thing Carny Dave.
The 10 best creatures for Ark Ragnarok. Also, make sure to like and subscribe as it really helps the channel. In at number 10 is the Pteranodon. Now this is found on pretty much every Ark map, and you should tame it pretty much on every Ark map that supports it. Obviously you can't really use it on Genesis Part 1 or Arboration, so don't use the Pteranodon there. The thing is about the Pteranodon is it is such an easy tame, and it is just a quick way of getting you up into the air. This thing really is a great creature that every beginner can wield to their advantage. These things are great for metal runs. They also have great speed and could just get you around the map safely, so you don't just have to keep going on the ground and getting killed by raptors or whatever in the early game. Also, if you were thinking about doing any kind of cave runs, the Pteranodon is a great option too, as it can quickly get you to the entrance of a cave, and if you have another couple, you can quickly fly back. But there's only one real thing about the Pteranodon, is its saddle is a little bit annoying to get with all that chitin and keratin. Also, if you thought the Pteranodon doesn't deal enough melee damage to kill things, you'd be wrong, as a good high level Pteranodon can kill quite a lot of big creatures. I have killed a few Rexes in my time with the Pteranodon. Also, if you are a PvP Ark player, taming a Pteranodon is a great shout, as these are very good for any kind of raiding due to their spin ability. If you were thinking about taming one, just simply bowler one, and then probably at the stage you'll have the saddle unlocked, you will use a crossbow with some trancos, but if you are still in the early stages of the game, use a club. In at number 9 is the Baryonyx. Now this is really an essential creature on every map, but it can especially be useful on Ark's older maps, such as the Island, Ragnarok, and the Center. This is a great creature with not a very difficult taming method. It deals great damage and will probably kill most things that you will face in Ark. You're probably not going to take it into boss arenas, but for killing things like raptors, terror birds, maybe even Rexes and things like that, these will do a perfect job for you. But now it tends to be that their main use is for doing cave runs, as these things are big enough that they will deal a good amount of damage, but they are small enough that they will fit into most caves easily without using glitches or hacks or anything like that. Since cryopods have been released, this doesn't matter so much, but it is great that you don't have to cryo your dinos during a cave run. They also do have a secret ability in water, which can stun creatures very large. But also, if you did want to use these things for traveling, these are a great option as well, as they have great speed and they are very agile. The Baryonyx is not the kind of creature to get stuck on all the objects Ark has to offer. But also, if you were wondering, how am I actually going to use that spin ability, which I just briefly showed you earlier, these things can stun things up to the size of a Megalodon. As you can see here, they are completely stunned, and if your Baryonyx has enough melee damage, you can finish off some deep sea creatures really fast. Sadly, this won't work for Plesios and Mosers. And if you're taming, just make sure to head straight to the swamp. In at number 8 is the Thyla. Now these are found in any redwood biome that you can find on any map. These are quite common on the island as well, but they are definitely useful on Ragnarok as well. The amount of mobility these things have once you have tamed them is absolutely insane. Yes, I do have a bit of an extra speed boost here. This isn't their official speed, but if you tweak your settings a little bit, these things can travel across the map at insane speeds. And even at default speeds, these things are insanely fast. Also, they can even climb up walls and vertical surfaces, so the Thyla is also an ideal choice for doing base raids. And on top of all of that, they're not even a very difficult tame, apart from them obviously spawning in the redwoods, as the redwoods is really a biome you don't want to be in. They are a very simple knockout tame, and if you have a net gun, these things are definitely a breeze. Another cool ability they have, like many other creatures, is a bleed ability. You can blast through so many creatures with this ability, so it is so good that this creature has it. It just really makes this thing a melee beast, quite similar to the Deinonychus or even a Carno, as they all share this same ability. These things are just so mobile and so full of features, you have to tame one. In at number 8 is the Giga. Now this is a very widespread creature and is used by a lot of Ark players. But this thing is so much better to tame on Ragnarok than on the island, as these things actually spawn in a reasonable manner. On the island, these things are so rare and rarely even ever a high level. And if you are going to tame one of these things, you're going to go for a high level, because they take a lot of commitment to tame. The amount of tranks you're going to go through, and probably quite a lot of metal you are going to go through by building a trap for one of these things, is insane. Also, you're going to need a hell of a lot of narcotics. But if you are looking to tame a Giga on Ragnarok, head straight to the Highlands part of the map, and you will find at least 2, probably even 3 Gigas on that biome. Once you've got your Giga tamed, you kind of know the drill. These things do insane amounts of damage to every creature, and are just great tames to have. They can wipe out any creature you have faced in Ark, no problems at all. But the sad thing is, they do have really terrible stamina, so don't even bother leveling that up at all, as it's not going to make any significant difference. But also, be careful with these things, as you do not want that little rage meter of theirs to fill up to 100%, as your hard-earned and well-deserved tame will absolutely wipe you off and kill you immediately, and you will lose the tame. So, in at number 6 is the Carcharodontosaurus. Gosh, that is an absolute mouthful. At least you don't have to spell it to tame it. But anyway, this essentially is an upgraded version of the Giga, in my opinion. It has actually good stamina for once, so this can actually run around. It's a lot faster than the Giga, and once its meter has built up, it will do a lot more damage than the Giga. These things are going to spawn in the Highlands biome as well, like the Giga, and also their population will probably be about the same as well, so you can expect about 2 or 3 of these to be lurking around. Now, just to briefly talk about stamina again, these do have a lot more stamina than the Giga, and also definitely level this up, as it will actually make a significant difference, as these things can run for a while if you just pump a couple levels into stamina. But obviously, you're not just going to want to level stamina on this thing. You're going to want to take advantage of its great health and also really great melee damage. This thing really couldn't be better. Out of any map, Ragnarok is definitely the best place to tame yourself a Carcharodontosaurus, but that doesn't mean they're just useful on this map as well. Definitely give them a go on Extinction, as they are great. But still on Ragnarok, they will plow through any creature with ease. In at number 5 is the Megatherium. Now, these really are great herbivores, but they also have a wealth of other really useful features as well, which I will get onto in just a moment. The Megatherium can be found in the Redwoods biome and the Ice biome of Ragnarok, and really is not going to be a trouble to tame at all. Just simply trap it with the net gun or in a 2x2 little foundation trap that you can make, and just pop a few tranks into it, and very soon it will be knocked out. Its saddle also isn't that expensive too, so that does come as a bonus. These are great herbivores. Obviously they come with the same advantages as many others, but they also have many other things on top of that. You may not think the Megatherium is quite agile, but to be honest, it is actually a very good creature for traveling and movement. These things really do move at a quick pace and can get around everywhere. But also, they can just do the traditional herbivore things of just gathering some berries. These things can definitely do that and will do that very well. But also, the Megatherium has a very useful hidden ability, which is specifically useful on the island, but is very useful for doing some caves on Ark Ragnarok. When they kill an insect, they will get a rage buff, granting them damage reduction and also extra damage. In at number 4 is the Mantis. Now this can be found all over the kind of volcanic biomes of Ark Ragnarok, and these definitely have a wealth of abilities which will be extremely useful to any Ark player. As you can see here, I've equipped swords in the arms of my Mantis, but you can also use things like hatchets, picks and clubs. Pretty much any melee weapon will work in the hands of this thing, and they will do what you would expect that tool to do. In this case, I'm using swords here to kill a Diplo, and it is doing a very fine job of it. This thing does a lot of damage when it has these things equipped. But just remember, when these are equipped into the Mantis, the durability drain on this thing is a lot. But on Ragnarok, I specifically like to use these things for harvesting sheep to harvest mutton, because there are so many sheep in the Highlands biome, and the Mantis gives quick work to all of these things. Obviously, you don't just have to kill sheep, but I would mainly stick to killing sheep with the Mantis, as it is just so good at doing this. But you can kill big carnivores with it as well. That aloe went down pretty quickly. But also, the Mantis is very mobile as well. It is a very good travel creature. It can get you across the map pretty easily, but just watch out because it has a quite low health stat. In at number 3 is the RG. Now this is a great creature to have on any map, but it is definitely extremely useful on Ragnarok, and it can actually do some wyvern runs if you're on a pinch. But the main use of an RG, of course, is its extreme use for metal runs and things alike. It has weight reduction for things like metal, obsidian and crystal, and its saddle acts as a portable smithy. This may not be the fastest flyer, but it will definitely get all of your Ark needs done. The RG is going to give you a wealth of features that you will simply love. This thing has great stamina, unlike the Pteranodon, and can pick up even larger creatures than the Pteranodon. If you want to pick up an Anki with this thing, that is a great choice, as a tamed Anki in the hands of an RG is so good for metal runs. Also, if you want to heal up quickly, if you eat a dead corpse, the RG will heal insanely fast, as it has a great ability for that. This is great in a pinch if you have just been in a heavy heat of combat. Also, the RG has a reasonable health and melee stat as well, so don't underestimate its power. In at number 2 is the Griffin. Now there is a lot to say about the Griffin, and this is really an amazing creature that every Ark player should tame. And actually, just as a little fun fact, this was the map that the Griffin was introduced on. The Griffin has a wealth of abilities and is also great for taming Quetzals, as you can use your weapons on the back of this thing. But most people know it for its dive ability. This thing really makes it zoom across the map. Yes, a wyvern may be faster on paper, but when this thing dive bombs, this thing can travel so fast across the map. And also, don't underestimate its power. This thing deals an insane amount of melee damage and can actually deal damage in a lot of ways as well. Obviously, it's going to have its standard bite ability, which is really going to pack a punch. You will see me kill a Bronto in a second with this thing, but the Griffin really does have another trick up its sleeve. But just before I tell you about this ability, I want to tell you a few possible uses. Personally, I think this is a great thing to use in PvP, as you can trick your enemy quite well. As if you're attacking them and then you leap into the air and dive bomb down onto them, it will do an immense amount of damage, and this Bronto really didn't survive that well. But also another great use for the Griffin on Ragnarok is for raiding wyvern nests, as you can just quickly pop in and just take that egg and fly out, because these things are really agile, and with that dive bomb ability, the wyverns are never going to catch you. And finally, speaking of the wyverns, in at number 1 is the wyvern. Now that actually is a common misconception that wyverns were first introduced on Ragnarok, but that is very far from the truth. These were first introduced on Scorched Earth, but Ragnarok still did introduce one wyvern, which is the Ice Wyvern. But today I want to talk about the Lightning Wyvern, as I think this is the most useful. Any wyvern is as easy to tame as the next. Now obviously a wyvern isn't easy to tame, but they all have the same taming method. All you have to do is go into the wyvern trench, probably use a griffin and steal its egg. The Lightning Wyvern has a wealth of abilities, such as its normal bite, and as you just saw about 10 seconds ago, its lightning breathing ability. But there's also something that gets missed out quite a lot. It is actually a reasonably good wood harvester, as you can use its wing flap ability. You can do this by pressing C on your keyboard. And on top of that, if you wanted to use these things for taming, these things are great as well, as they can pick up any medium to large size creature. And the wyverns are actually faster than the griffin, just sadly they do not have that dive bomb. But anyway, that marks the end of today's video. Comment your top 10 below if you didn't agree, and I'll see you all later. Bye.